I always thought the worst thing a mother could hear was, "I hate you." I was wrong. Because when my daughter Savannah leaned across the dinner table, wine glass in hand, and joked, "We'll probably turn your room into a walk-in closet when you're gone," I didn't feel hated. I felt discarded. The laughter from her husband, Brent, echoed in the background like the clink of ice in a glass, cold and careless. They didn't see the way my fork paused midair. Or maybe they did. And just didn't care. It was my birthday. 62. I'd spent the morning making the lemon rosemary chicken Savannah liked as a child and the banana cream pie Brent had raved about once years ago. I lit candles, set the table with the good dishes, and even ironed the linen napkins. I had planned everything to make it feel like family, but by dessert, it felt like a wake. Mine. They were already planning a life after me. They didn't know that I'd just returned from a follow-up scan, or that the nurse had squeezed my hand a little too tightly after reading the chart. I hadn't told them. Maybe out of pride, maybe out of fear, but mostly because I knew. They didn't ask how I was doing. They never really did anymore. Savannah used to call every morning during her commute. Now, weeks would pass. Her excuse was always the same. "Life's just busy, Mom." But she always seemed to have time to ask about the house. "The market's great right now," she'd say. "You could sell and move into one of those active living condos. With amenities. Amenities. Like I was a resort guest waiting to be checked out." That night, I excused myself early, blaming a headache. I didn't cry, not in front of them. But once I was alone, I sat at the edge of my bed, in the room they were so eager to repurpose, and let the silence press down on me. The walls felt closer than ever. My late husband, Peter, and I had bought this house in 1987. Every inch of it held memories, sticky handprints on the pantry door, growth marks etched into the hallway trim, the dent in the kitchen tile from where Savannah had dropped her first trophy. I built a life here. I raised a daughter here. And now she wanted to gut it, sell it, strip it of all meaning, and turn it into profit. It wasn't just the house. It was the way she said it, like I was already gone. Like I wasn't sitting right in front of her. Breathing. Remembering. Hurting. The next morning, I found the wine glass she'd left on the windowsill still full. Lipstick smudged the rim. I stared at it for a long time, then dumped it down the sink. Then I opened the drawer Peter and I once called the drawer of secrets. It held old tax forms, Peter's worn wallet, and a folder labeled property, title, and trust. I hadn't touched it since he passed. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the documents. And that's when I saw it, Peter's signature, next to mine, on a clause I'd long forgotten about. In the event of co-owner death, sole ownership and trustee power falls to the surviving spouse. Me. This house, there was mine. A strange calmness settled over me. The kind that comes when you hit rock bottom and find bedrock underneath your feet. Savannah thought she could nudge me out quietly. Sell my home like a piece of old furniture. She was wrong. I wasn't ready to tell her I was sick. Not yet. She'd turn it into another reason why I couldn't handle things. Another excuse to push me toward a retirement brochure. But I wasn't weak. Not yet. And I wasn't done. I spent the next few days acting normal. I watered the hydrangeas, took my walks around the block, answered Savannah's texts when she finally remembered to send them, usually short, usually transactional. "Do you still have the roof quote from last fall? Thinking about refinancing options. What's your monthly?" Not once did she ask, "How are you?" I started keeping a notebook. A black moleskine Peter had given me once. In it, I wrote down every instance of her dismissiveness, every sentence that chipped away at my worth. Not because I needed revenge, because I needed proof. Proof for myself that I wasn't imagining this, that my hurt had roots. Then one evening, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. I had called Savannah to ask if she could come over to fix the internet. I played dumb. She answered on speaker by accident. Brent's voice in the background, "Just tell her to call Geek Squad. Or better yet, hand over the deed and we'll handle everything." Savannah laughed. She probably doesn't even remember where the deed is. I hung up. I didn't say a word, but I found the deed. And I made 3 copies. I placed one in my safety deposit box, one in a file marked private beneath my sweaters, and one, well, let's just say it's in a place Savannah would never think to look. Because if they were already planning for me to be gone, I figure it was time to start planning too. Not for my death, but for my legacy. And trust me, Savannah won't see it coming. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. The next few days, I moved through my home like a ghost with purpose. I didn't cry anymore. Something in me had shifted the night I heard Brent's voice through Savannah's speakerphone. That careless tone, like my life was just a set of keys to be handed over. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Confrontation gave her power. I needed to be smarter. She thought I was senile, or at least close enough to it that she could push me toward a transition plan. A plan that clearly benefited her more than me. That morning, I opened the closet in Peter's old office. It still smelled faintly of his cologne, tucked into the corners of wool coats and time. I reached up into the highest shelf and pulled down a battered box marked Tax, 1999. Inside was a mess of paperwork. Mortgage notes, refinancing history, copies of letters we'd once used to dispute a boundary issue with the neighbors. But there, sandwiched between insurance forms and our old landline bill, was the gem I hadn't realized I needed, an unsigned power of attorney form from 2008. Peter had printed it out for his mother, back when she'd started forgetting her pills. I remembered him saying, "It's better to have control before things spiral." Savannah wanted control. Fine. Let her think she had it. But if this turned legal, and I had a gut feeling it might, then I needed leverage. So I quietly scheduled a meeting with an estate attorney named Helen Sosa, a woman Peter and I had worked with long ago, the one who'd handled our refinance. When I arrived at Helen's office, she greeted me with a warm, cautious smile. "You look like someone who's been planning something for a while." I nodded. "I want to make sure no one touches my house, especially not my daughter." Helen raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. She let me talk. I told her everything: Savannah's sudden interest in the property, her refusal to acknowledge my autonomy, the remarks about me being gone and repurposing the room. I told her I was sick, though I didn't yet have a name for what was wrong. Helen asked the question Savannah never did. "Do you have help? Are you scared?" I lied on the first, told the truth on the second. She walked me through options. Guardianship protections. Updating the deed with a survivorship clause to block third-party sales. Even a living trust that would pass the house directly to someone I could name, someone other than Savannah. And then she asked, "Is there anyone else you'd trust to inherit this?" I opened my mouth, and to my surprise, a name slipped out. Maria. My cleaning lady. My once-a-week confidant. The woman who had wiped down the same counters I cried at, who had quietly tucked flowers from her garden into a mason jar for my kitchen without ever asking for praise. Helen didn't react, just jotted the name down. "Are you serious about that?" she asked gently. I paused, then nodded. She's the only person who still sees me. I left the office with a growing sense of resolve. Savannah had made one thing clear: she was only loyal to what I could give her. Once that was gone, so was I. When I got home, I found a voicemail from Savannah. "Hey, Mom. Just wondering if you've looked at the brochure I left. The retirement condo in Lakewood. They've got a great spa, and it's, quiet. I can go with you this weekend if you want." I deleted the message. That night, I pulled out the black Moleskine again and began a new list. What she thinks I don't know. She toured the Lakewood condos last month. I saw the notepad in her purse. Brent forwarded my property tax info to his brother. I saw it open on the iPad. She had a locksmith come out to check for rusted hinges. He left a business card. I called him. She requested a full quote to rekey the entire house. It wasn't just about convenience anymore. Savannah was laying groundwork to move me out. I was being phased out of my own life. But here's the thing no one tells you about growing old. When people stop seeing you, you learn how to move unseen. And so I started rearranging things. Not furniture.
Finance.
I closed the joint account Savannah had access to, transferred my savings into a private credit union. I even rewrote my will, appointing Helen as my executor and Maria as the beneficiary of the house, conditional on her never selling it for profit. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was loud. Anger burned out fast. This was different. This was precision. This was clarity. Then one Sunday afternoon, Savannah dropped by unannounced. She walked through the front door with a chirpy, fake brightness. "I brought you lunch," she called. I watched from the dining room. In her hands, takeout boxes from a place I used to love but couldn't eat anymore. She hadn't asked. "I thought we could look at paint swatches," she said, "just to refresh the guest room. You know, get it ready." "Ready for who?" I asked. She blinked. "Oh, future guests. Or, maybe a home office." I stared at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't blink. "You mean after I move out?" Her smile faltered. "Mom, come on. Don't be dramatic." "Funny. I was about to say the same thing to you." She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. "Just look it over," she said, placing it on the table between us. "I found a unit near the lake with an elevator and 24-hour staff. You'd love it. Brent, and I can handle everything. Just sign when you're ready." I picked up the envelope, held it in my lap. And then I said calmly, "I'll think about it." Savannah smiled. She thought she'd won. But she didn't know I had already won. She didn't know the document inside that envelope would soon be legally void. Because while she was preparing my exit, I was preparing her inheritance. And it would be exactly what she deserved. The envelope sat on the side table for 2 full days before I opened it. Not because I was afraid, no. I waited because I wanted to understand exactly what Savannah thought she could get away with. That's how you win in silence. Let them make their move first. Let them believe you're too fragile to counter it. When I finally tore it open, I wasn't surprised by what I found. 2 glossy pamphlets from Lakeside Meadows Senior Living, both filled with staged photos of smiling elderly people playing bridge and holding water aerobics noodles. A typed list of estimated transition costs. And a pre-filled power of attorney form with my name and Savannah's already printed, just waiting for my signature. But the cherry on top? A handwritten sticky note stuck to the POA form, written in Savannah's tidy script. "Mom, just sign this so we can make things easier for you. I promise, it's just temporary. Love you. Love you." Those 2 words might as well have been a knife. It was temporary, all right. Temporary until she could sell the house out from under me. Until I was locked into a retirement condo, like a piece of antique furniture she didn't know what to do with. I could see the whole strategy: isolate, delegate, dominate. And then I found the final insult, a printout of a Zillow listing for my own home. She had been preparing it for weeks. Photos taken without my knowledge. Notes about prime renovation potential. Language that stripped my home of its soul and turned it into a real estate asset. I placed all of it in my folder titled Case Notes, Savannah. At my next meeting with Helen, I handed her the documents. She skimmed through them with a trained eye, her lips pursed. "This isn't just thoughtless," she said. "It's calculated. She's trying to build a paper trail that paints you as incapable. A voluntary surrender of autonomy. That POA form? That's the linchpin." "She won't get it," I said. Helen looked up. "Are you sure you're ready to go through with this? I can lock everything down. Your accounts, the deed, the title transfer into a living trust. But once this starts, it can't be undone quietly." I thought about Peter. About all the times I cleaned up Savannah's messes when she was young. About the nights I skipped sleep to type her college essays. About how she stopped inviting me to her birthday dinners because, as she once put it, "Your clothes depress me, Mom." "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." Within days, Helen had filed the paperwork to transfer the deed into a trust managed by her firm. The house was now legally protected, no sale, no rekeying, no POA would touch it unless I said so. I named Maria as the successor trustee. And then I did something that felt small but radical. I changed the locks. Not the exterior locks. No, I left those the same. But the door to Peter's old office, the one where I stored every document, letter, and legal form, now had a new keypad entry. And Savannah didn't have the code. It was the first physical boundary I'd drawn in years. And then Savannah came back, unannounced again. She had started making a habit of that. No knock, just a chirpy, "Mom, it's me," as she breezed in like she still lived here. But this time, she wasn't alone. Brent followed behind her, holding a clipboard and wearing that smug real estate smile he always plastered on before a pitch. He glanced at the hallway with an appraiser's eye. I noticed the measuring tape clipped his jeans. I stepped out from the kitchen and met them in the foyer. "You didn't call," I said. "We were in the neighborhood," Savannah said lightly. "Thought we'd pop in and help you go through a few things. Maybe start pre-packing the guest room." Brent smiled too widely. "Just want to make the transition smooth for everyone. And this is your house for now," he added, almost under his breath. I tilted my head. "Actually, it's not in my name anymore." They both froze. "What?" Savannah asked, voice tight. "I transferred it into a living trust," I said, watching her face drain of color. "It's protected. No sale without the trustee's approval." "Who's the trustee?" Brent snapped. Helen's name would have stung. But I knew what would break them. "Maria." Savannah blinked like I'd spoken in code. "The housekeeper?" "She's more than that," I said. "She's been more of a daughter to me these past few years than you have." The silence was thick and sudden, like the oxygen had been sucked from the room. "You're kidding," Savannah said, voice low now. "You're punishing me." "No," I said. "I'm preserving what's mine." Brent's face hardened. "You can't be serious. This is a huge financial mistake. That woman doesn't have the experience to manage property." "She has the decency not to sell it out from under me," I interrupted. Savannah dropped her purse on the floor. "This is insane. I was trying to help you." "No," I said again. "You were trying to erase me." They didn't stay long after that. They stormed out, Savannah fuming, Brent already making calls. But I didn't flinch. I locked the door behind them. And for the first time in weeks, I turned the key without fear. That night, Maria came by after her shift. I told her everything. At first, she didn't believe me. "You named me in the trust," she whispered. "I did," I said. "But only if you want it. I know it's a big ask." She wiped tears from her eyes. "You treated me like family when no one else did. Of course I'll protect this house." I nodded, fighting back my own tears. And then I reached into Peter's drawer and pulled out the final envelope, the one I hadn't labeled. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter addressed to Savannah. I hadn't written it yet, but I knew what it would say. "You once called this house dead space. I called it home. You once called me a burden. I called you my daughter. I gave you everything. And when I needed you most, you gave me paperwork and paint samples. This house is no longer yours to claim. It never was. And now it never will be." The letter stayed in the drawer for 3 more days. Not out of hesitation, but strategy. If Savannah had taught me anything, it was that timing could make or break a message. I didn't want to send it in the heat of a fight. I wanted to send it when she thought she still had options. I waited until the end of the week. Until I knew they'd calmed down enough to believe their charm offensive could still fix this. That's when I sealed the envelope in soft cream paper and mailed it. No email, no warning, no subject line to skim past. Let her read every word. Let her hear my voice in the silence of her kitchen. Then I waited. It arrived 2 days later. I didn't get a call. No angry voicemail. Not even a cryptic text. Just silence. But I knew my daughter too well. She wouldn't lash out, not right away. That would make her look like the aggressor. She'd try to pivot, to play the concerned, wounded child who only wanted what was best. I braced myself for her second act. It came that Saturday morning. She showed up with a bouquet of store-bought daisies and a Tupperware of her infamous chicken salad, the one she knew I hated because of the raisins, but still brought to every potluck anyway. Her smile was the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "I've been thinking," she began, as she set the flowers down like peace offerings. Maybe I pushed too hard. I get it, okay? You're not ready for a new chapter. I shouldn't have rushed you. I poured 2 cups of tea and said nothing. She continued, but this Maria thing, it's a bit extreme, isn't it? There it was. Not sorry for the manipulation. Not sorry for the unsolicited tours and documents. Just sorry I didn't choose her. I trust Maria, I said. More than I trust someone who made a Zillow listing before asking if I was even moving. Savannah shifted in her seat. Mom, I didn't list it. I was just exploring options. Brent said. Brent, I said sharply, doesn't live here. Brent doesn't get to decide what happens to my home. She bit the inside of her cheek. I'm your daughter. Exactly, I replied. Which means you should have been the first to ask how I was. Not the first to ask what I'd be doing with the spare room after I died. Her mouth opened in protest, but I cut her off. You didn't check on me, Savannah. Not once. You brought moving brochures before you brought soup. You gave me paperwork before you gave me presents. She sat back, blinking too quickly. I could see her walls crumbling, just slightly. But I'm here now, she said softly. I smiled sadly. Yes. Now that you can't get what you wanted. The silence that followed was long. I didn't fill it. Let her sit in it. Let her taste the bitterness of being outplayed. Do you even know how long I was sick before you noticed? I finally asked. Her eyes widened. You're sick? I nodded. I didn't tell you. Because I knew exactly what you'd do with that information. You'd use it as leverage. That's not fair, she whispered. I leaned forward. Neither is being treated like a speed bump on the way to your next investment property. Savannah lowered her gaze. Her fingers gripped the edge of her teacup, like she wanted to disappear into it. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said. But you did, I said. And now you don't get to pretend it didn't happen. She looked up, tears forming now. So what? That's it? I'm out of the will. Maria gets everything. I stood and walked to the kitchen counter where I kept the original copy of the trust. I handed it to her. She flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. When she got to the beneficiary section, her mouth parted. She looked up at me, eyes glassy. You left me the piano? I nodded. It was never mine to keep. That piano was yours the day you played your first full song on it. She clutched the document, stunned. And the rest? She asked. I'm leaving the house to someone who never tried to erase me from it. Savannah didn't cry. Not yet. She just nodded, quietly. For the first time in years, she looked like the little girl who used to sit on my lap during thunderstorms and ask if I'd ever leave her. And I realized something. She hadn't changed overnight. She had been fading away slowly, gradually stepping over the boundaries of our love until she convinced herself I was just another old woman in the way. And I had let her. Because mothers do that sometimes. We let love blind us. But no more. Before she left, she turned at the doorway. Are we done? I thought about it. The betrayal, the silence, the ache of realizing the person you loved most could reduce you to a logistical inconvenience. We're paused, I said. But not finished. You'll have to earn your way back. She nodded and left. When she was gone, I walked to the study, opened the drawer, and finally wrote the last sentence of the letter I drafted in my head months ago. You can always come back to this home, but not as an heir, only as a daughter. The house settled into quiet after Savannah's visit, the kind of quiet that felt neither comforting nor cruel, just true. No more pretending. No more forced lunches or fragile politeness. Just the truth between us now, stretched like a crack across the kitchen floor. She had chosen convenience over compassion, and I had chosen to stop making that easy for her. The next week passed in slow waves. Maria came by on Tuesday. She didn't ask questions, though I could see them in her eyes. Instead, she wiped down the windowsills, hummed a hymn I didn't recognize, and left a loaf of banana bread on the counter, without saying a word. Later that evening, I sliced a piece for myself and left the rest on the back porch for the birds. It was funny. For most of my life, I'd associated legacy with the big things. Money, titles, land. Now I saw it in smaller gestures. In who remembered what pie I liked. In who thought to ask how I slept. And I had no intention of leaving that kind of legacy to someone who didn't see it. Around midweek, Savannah's silence began to ache, not because I missed her voice, but because I knew the silence wasn't growth. It was calculation. She was thinking, planning, finding a new angle. And I was right. Friday morning, a letter arrived, not handwritten, not heartfelt. A certified envelope from a firm I didn't recognize, Brent's cousin's law office. Inside was a neatly folded document requesting a formal reconsideration of the amended trust designation, citing undue influence, possible elder manipulation, and my compromised state of health. It was dressed up in legal language, but the message was clear. They were trying to take the house back. I read it twice, then calmly filed it under future evidence. The betrayal didn't shock me, but the gall did. They'd underestimated me. Again. That afternoon, I called Helen. She didn't answer at first court, but when she called back, her voice was firm and precise. "This is a move of desperation," she said. "We'll shut it down before it even gets oxygen. But we'll need to be proactive." "I figured," I said. "We'll file a response, attach the medical affidavits you gave me, the timeline of Savannah's actions, the appraiser showing up without consent. It's all admissible." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "And Linda," she added gently, "if this goes to court, you'll need to testify. About your mental capacity. Your reasons for choosing Maria." "I'll do it," I said. Gladly. I hung up and sat in Peter's old recliner, letting the weight of it all press into my shoulders. My daughter wasn't just hurt. She was retaliating. I could feel her building a case in her mind. Mom was confused. Maria took advantage. I was trying to help. She was rewriting the story to make herself the victim. But she wasn't the only one with a story to tell. I still had mine. And for the first time, I intended to tell it fully and out loud. That night, I pulled down an old photo album from a closet. The leather cover creaked as I opened it, revealing snapshots of a life Savannah seemed to have forgotten. There was the photo of her 5th grade spelling bee, me holding her in a bear hug after she'd won. A Polaroid of our camping trip in 1993, where I'd carried her across a flooded trail on my back. A Christmas 2001, her sitting on the floor in front of the fireplace, a piano-shaped box beside her. Moments. Proof. I laid the photos out on the table, one by one, and started writing captions beneath them. Not for a scrapbook. For a courtroom. Because if Savannah wanted to turn my life into a battle of perception, then I'd bring the whole picture. Not just the legal kind, the human kind. The mother who fed her when she was sick, who worked 2 jobs to put her through college, who forgave more than she probably should have. I would not let her bury me in the narrative of her convenience. And I knew just when to show her. The next morning, I invited her to coffee. Neutral ground. A small cafe halfway between her place and mine. She arrived late, sunglasses on, posture stiff. "Brent said I shouldn't come," she muttered, sliding into the seat across from me. "That's funny," I said. "Brent's not on the trust documents. Or in the photos I brought." Her brows furrowed. "Photos." I pulled out a slim envelope and slid it across the table. "Not documents. Just 5 photos. Each one captioned in my handwriting." She picked them up, confused. The spelling bee. The camping trip. Her first piano recital. Her high school graduation. And one of her asleep on my chest in the hospital bed the day she was born. She stared at them, quiet. "This is who I was to you," I said. "Not an asset. Not a burden. A mother. The one who taught you how to walk, how to read, how to love." She didn't say anything. "I didn't give Maria the house to punish you," I continued. "I gave it to her because she remembered who I am, even when you forgot." Her fingers tightened around the photos. "I didn't forget." "Then prove it," I said. "Drop the challenge. Stop trying to win back the house. Win back me." She sat back, swallowing hard. I didn't think it would go this far." "It didn't have to." "I thought you were slipping," she whispered. "I thought you needed help." "No. I said, voice firm. You thought I would notice. She looked down, and for a moment, her walls cracked. I miss how things used to be, she said. Before Dad died. Before all this. I do too, I said. But you don't get to walk through my grief and rearrange the furniture. You don't get to push me out of my life and call it love. She blinked rapidly. So, what now? Now, I said, rising from my chair, you decide what matters more, your name on a deed, or your place in my life. And with that, I left the cafe. I didn't look back. She still had the photos in her hands. But now, the story was mine again. The days after our cafe conversation passed like molasses, slow, thick with unspoken words. Savannah didn't call. She didn't challenge the trust again. But I also didn't receive an apology. I didn't expect one. What I did receive, 3 days later, was an email from her personal address. No subject line, just 2 sentences. I've withdrawn the formal claim. Maria can keep the house. I won't fight it anymore. I hope you find peace in your decision. Peace. That word rolled around my chest like a marble in an empty glass. This wasn't peace. It was withdrawal. Not surrender out of understanding, but exhaustion, maybe shame. A quiet retreat from a battle she thought she could win. Still, it was something. I forwarded the message to Helen, who confirmed it was legally binding once she filed the withdrawal paperwork. You're in the clear, she said. No more challenges. The house is yours until you say otherwise. But my mind wasn't at ease. Because Savannah wasn't just my daughter, she was also someone's mother. My granddaughter, Harper, had been caught in the middle of all this. Only 11 years old and already picking up on silences that echoed louder than arguments. Harper and I used to bake cookies every Sunday. She loved cracking the eggs and sneaking chocolate chips when she thought I wasn't looking. But for the past month, Savannah hadn't brought her around. I didn't want the legacy of this story to be just about court filings and betrayal. I wanted Harper to know the truth, not the ugly bitterness, but the quiet strength it took to say no more. So I made a decision. I would host one more gathering. Not for Savannah. For Harper. A Sunday brunch like old times. Just a few familiar dishes, the smell of cinnamon rolls in the air, and a place for Harper to feel safe again. I texted Savannah with the invitation. No guilt trip, no demands. Just a sentence. Harper's favorite cinnamon rolls will be here Sunday at 10. You're welcome to join her. I didn't expect a response. But at 9:45 that morning, a car pulled into the driveway. Savannah stepped out first, her posture tighter than usual. Then Harper burst from the back seat, running toward the porch. Grandma, she shouted. I opened my arms, and she folded into them like she never left. Mom said you weren't feeling well, she whispered. I kissed her forehead. I'm feeling stronger now. We spent the morning making a mess in the kitchen, flour on the floor, sticky hands, laughter that loosened something deep in my ribs. Savannah lingered near the entryway, arms crossed, uncertain whether she was welcome. I left the door open. That was enough. At one point, Harper tugged at my sleeve. Why doesn't Mommy like the house anymore? I crouched to her level and looked her straight in the eyes. It's not that she doesn't like it, I said gently. Sometimes grown-ups forget that places can hold feelings. And this house holds a lot of mine. Like what? Like love. And hard days. And how it feels when someone makes you soup even when they're mad at you. She nodded solemnly. I like it here. I smiled. Me too. After brunch, I walked Savannah to the door. She hadn't touched much food, but her face was softer. She misses this, she said quietly, nodding toward Harper. So do I. I waited. Let the air do the heavy lifting. You were right, she added after a moment. About all of it. I wasn't thinking about you. I was thinking about outcomes. Schedules. Logistics. Spreadsheets don't make good mothers, I said, not unkindly. Her eyes glassed over. You think I'm a bad one? I took a breath. I think you're a scared one. And I think scared people do cruel things when they don't know how to sit still in the dark. She looked away, shame creeping over her like a fog. I didn't mean to erase you. I know, I said. But you tried to edit me out of my own story. That's something I won't forget. Savannah nodded, slow and deliberate. Then she asked, "Is there a way back from this?" "That depends," I said. "Are you asking for the house?" "No," she whispered. "I'm asking for a second chance." That was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not a court order, not a public confession. Just that small, cracked voice of a daughter finally stepping back into the role of family. I didn't answer right away. I simply opened the door wider. "You can come in any time," I said. "But the house isn't the gift anymore. I am." Savannah pressed her lips together, then hugged me. A tight, trembling embrace that said everything her words couldn't. Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I stood at the window watching her car drive away. Harper waved from the back seat, her little hand pressed to the glass like a seal. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not victory, not vengeance, but healing. It didn't come with a ribbon or applause. It came with a little girl's handprint on a window. And that was enough. Monday morning began with something unexpected. Quiet joy. It wasn't loud or grand. Just the sound of birdsong outside the kitchen window as I sipped my tea, Maria humming softly as she wiped down the counters, and the faint rustle of the curtains in the early autumn breeze. A kind of peace that comes not from things being perfect, but from knowing they're finally honest. The house felt different now. Lighter. Savannah's challenge had been dropped. The trust was secure. Maria, though overwhelmed at times, had risen to her new role with humility and care. She didn't gloat. She didn't brag. She simply showed up, just as she always had, with kindness. But even as the legal fight quieted, the emotional echoes hadn't fully left. Savannah hadn't called since brunch. She hadn't texted either. And that was fine. Sometimes bridges need time to rebuild, plank by plank in silence. I focused on the things that grounded me. Each morning, I took a walk around the neighborhood. Familiar sidewalks, familiar trees. But now I moved slower. Not from illness, though the fatigue still came and went, but from intention. I noticed things I used to pass without thought. The moss that crept along the garden bricks, the way the neighbor's golden retriever always barked at squirrels, but never at people. These tiny details had become anchors. Then came the letter. Not a legal notice. Not from Savannah. This one was from Harper. A note scrawled in purple gel pen, written on wide-ruled paper decorated with stickers. Maria found it tucked into the mailbox between grocery coupons. It read, "Dear Grandma, Mommy was crying yesterday. I think she's sad that she hurt your heart. I miss Sunday cookies and playing cards. I liked your house because it smells like cinnamon and you. Mommy said we're going to try again. She says people don't get erased. I think that's good. Love. Harper Purple Heart." I read it 3 times, my eyes burning with tears. This was the legacy I wanted. Not titles or deeds, but memory, connection, healing passed down like heirlooms. I folded the letter and placed it inside the moleskine notebook, the same one I once used to document betrayal. Now it held something else, proof of grace. Later that day, Maria joined me on the porch. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind rustle the leaves. "She's trying," Maria said quietly, meaning Savannah. "She is," I replied. "That's more than I expected." Maria hesitated. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "Why me?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Why trust me with the house? With all this?" I looked at her then, not as an employee, not even just as a friend, but as a woman who had walked beside me through some of my loneliest years. "Because you saw me," I said. "When everyone else was too busy trying to manage me, you just saw me. You asked how I slept. You brought your mother's soup when I lost my appetite. You never once treated me like a burden." Maria blinked, quickly brushing away a tear. "I didn't give you the house," I added. "I gave you the responsibility of protecting the story that lives inside it. And I trust you not to rewrite it." She nodded, too emotional to speak. Later that evening, I received a text from Savannah. Do you have time for a walk tomorrow? Just us. I stared at the screen for a long moment before responding. Come by after breakfast. Wear comfy shoes. She arrived the next morning, no makeup, no pretense. Just jeans, a cardigan, and sneakers. Like the daughter I used to know. We didn't say much as we walked. Just moved slowly through the neighborhood, past the park where she used to chase fireflies, past the corner store where she once cried over a dropped popsicle. Then, without prompting, she spoke. Do you remember when I sprained my ankle in 6th grade? I smiled. Of course. You screamed like the world was ending. I remember you carried me all the way home, she said. Didn't even hesitate. You were my baby, I replied. Savannah looked at the sidewalk, her voice softer now. I don't know when I stopped acting like your baby. I didn't answer. Some truths don't need echoing. But I want to fix it, she continued. Even if I don't deserve to. Even if it takes time. I stopped walking and turned to face her. You don't have to earn your way back into my life, Savannah. You just have to stop trying to edit me out of yours. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know I was doing that.
You didn't want to know, I said.
But now you do. And that's where healing starts. She nodded, wiped her cheeks, and asked, Can I come by Sunday? Just to bake with Harper again. Only if you don't put raisins in the cookies. She laughed, a real one this time. And I realized that, slowly, we were rewriting something after all. Not the will. Not the deed. The relationship. And maybe, just maybe, that would be the part of the story worth passing down. The house smelled like brown sugar and vanilla again. Sunday morning came, and for the first time in over a year, the kitchen was alive. Not just functioning, alive. Harper stood on her step stool beside the counter, her sleeves rolled up and her hands buried deep in cookie dough. Savannah sat across from her, measuring out flour with the focus of someone trying to rebuild something grain by grain. Maria watched from the breakfast nook, sipping her coffee with a quiet smile. I stood near the oven, wooden spoon in hand, pretending to oversee, but really just taking it in. These were the kinds of moments that don't make it into court documents or trust deeds. Moments that don't need to be notarized to matter. Harper accidentally spilled a cup of flour. The cloud of white burst upward like a snowstorm, and for a second, I braced myself for the tension, the blame, the sharp inhale of annoyance I'd grown too used to between Savannah and me. But it didn't come. Instead, Savannah laughed. Not a tight, performative chuckle, but a laugh that cracked something open. She scooped up a handful of the flour, smeared it across Harper's nose, and said, Now you look like Grandma when she bakes. Harper squealed. Do I have white eyebrows too? I snorted. You wish. And just like that, something that had been fractured between us, mother, daughter, granddaughter, began to realign. Later, when the cookies were cooling and the house had quieted, Savannah found me in the backyard. I was sitting on the wooden bench beneath the old pear tree, where Peter used to read the Sunday paper.
She sat beside me.
No fanfare. I've been thinking, she began, about everything. The house, the trust, you. I waited. I get now why you did it, she said. At first, I thought it was a punishment. But it wasn't. It was a boundary. And I've never been good at recognizing those, especially when they came from you. I nodded slowly. It wasn't about punishing you. It was about protecting myself. She folded her hands. I guess I just assumed you'd always be there. Always agree. Always give. I did give, I said. For decades. But love without respect starts to feel like a leash. She exhaled. I don't want to go back to the way things were. I want something better. I turned to her then, saw the rawness in her eyes.
She wasn't trying to sell me something.
She wasn't manipulating. She was just a daughter, afraid she'd lost her place. You can't undo what happened, I said. But you can stop it from repeating. I will. A pause hung between us, not heavy, just real. Can I ask something? She added after a moment. Of course. Do you really not want me in the will at all? I let that question hang in the air. I want to give you something more valuable than the house, I said. I want to give you a chance to remember who you were, who we were. But that only works if it's not about money. She looked down, absorbing the answer. So it's not a no, just a not yet. Exactly, I said. Trust isn't just a document. It's something earned. She nodded. That night, after they left, I walked the house room by room, touching the surfaces, the photos, the tiny details that define my life here. I lingered longest in the music room. Savannah's childhood piano still sat by the window, dustless, now thanks to Maria. A candle flickered gently beside it. I opened the bench and pulled out a folder I hadn't looked at in years. Inside was the original deed. The handwritten will Peter and I drafted before we had lawyers involved. A photo of the house from the day we moved in, still full of cardboard boxes and wild hope. At the bottom was a sealed envelope with my name on it, in Peter's handwriting. I opened it. Linda, if you're reading this, you probably had to be stronger than I ever was. I know the house will eventually become a symbol of something bigger. Our life, our work, our sacrifices. But more than that, it's a symbol of how we loved. Don't let it be sold to silence. Don't let it become a museum. Let it breathe. Let it evolve. But make sure whoever inherits it understands. This house carries stories. And stories don't belong to the highest bidder. They belong to those who listen. I trust you to choose the right person. Love, Peter. I folded the letter and placed it in the moleskine, beside Harper's. Then I wrote something I never thought I'd write again, a new clause. Not legal. Personal. To Savannah. If you continue to show up, not just to the house, but to me, I'll reconsider everything. Because what I want to pass on isn't walls or square footage. It's legacy. Memory. Love that isn't manipulative or measured, but real. You were my daughter before you were an heir. Become her again. And the rest will follow. I signed it and placed it beside the others. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about what I chose to keep and who I chose to keep it for. The seasons shifted almost without me noticing. The leaves outside the study window were suddenly golden and crisp, tumbling across the lawn like old stories in the wind. Fall had always been Peter's favorite. Everything's louder in the quiet, he used to say, raking leaves in gentle spirals. It's when you really hear what's been unsaid. That rang true more than ever now. The house was still mine. But the silence that had once felt like a punishment now felt more like a pause, an exhale between chapters. The legal fight was over. The trust was secure. Maria, humble and steady, continued to keep the home running, not just clean but alive. Savannah had stopped trying to reclaim it through force. And more importantly, she had started showing up again with Harper, with small things, fresh bread from the market, flowers from her garden, or just her presence. She never asked about the will again. She stopped trying to perform daughterhood and instead simply became my daughter again. We never had a grand apology scene. No dramatic sobs or declarations. Just two women who had been cracked open by misunderstanding and stitched back together by mutual effort. One late afternoon, Harper and I sat on the porch with mugs of cider, a blanket across our laps. "Grandma," she asked, "is this house going to be mine someday?" I looked down at her, the innocence in her face breaking something open in me. "Maybe," I said. "But more than that, I want you to have what it means." She tilted her head. "Like the cookies?" I laughed. "Yes. The cookies. The music. The talks we have out here. The way it feels when people love each other, even when they don't agree." She nodded seriously. "Okay, I'll keep it safe." And I believed her. Later that night, Savannah came over while Harper was asleep. She stood in the doorway, hesitant, holding a photo frame I hadn't seen in years. "I found this in the attic," she said. "Thought it belonged down here." I took it from her carefully. It was a photo from a Christmas morning long ago. Me, Peter, and a 5-year-old Savannah in pajamas, her arms thrown around both of us, grinning with her 2 missing front teeth. We looked full. Happy. Whole. "I used to think this was just a picture," Savannah said. "But now I know. It was a promise. One I broke." I didn't rush to absolve her. I just nodded. and one you can still mend." She exhaled, the guilt leaving her lungs like smoke. "I never told you," she continued, "but when I was pregnant with Harper, I was terrified. I didn't know how to be a mother without becoming you. And then later, I was terrified I wasn't enough, so I tried to control everything, including you." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry." This time, the apology wasn't dressed in convenience or shame. It was raw.
Real.
I reached out and touched her hand. "You don't have to become me, Savannah. You just have to remember who you are." She sat beside me, and we both stared at the photo for a while. The house creaked softly around us, its old bones settling into the night like a lullaby. "Mom," she asked after a pause, "when the time comes, what do I tell people? About the house?
No. About you.
About what happened between us?" I thought for a moment, then answered the way Peter would have. "Tell them we got lost, but we both left breadcrumbs." She smiled through tears. We didn't need to say more. 2 months later, I was sitting in my study when a letter arrived, another handwritten one. From Harper. It read, "Dear Grandma, I told Mommy I want to live with you when I'm older, but she says you'll be in heaven by then. I told her I don't mind if your ghost makes cookies.
I think this house is magic.
It makes people stop yelling and start listening. Mommy says you're brave. I think you're soft in the strong way, like bread with crust. I want to be like that, too. Love, Harper." I placed the letter inside the moleskine, now thick with pages. Letters, photos, the rewritten clause for Savannah, and Peter's voice from the grave. This wasn't just a record of betrayal or survival anymore. It was the story of a woman who learned how to stop giving everything away and how to give the right things to the right people. Savannah would inherit the piano, the journals, the recipes, not because she demanded them, but because she learned to value them again. Maria would remain the trustee, the steward. She didn't ask for credit, and that's why she deserved it. Harper, she would inherit the story, not the sanitized version, the real one. And maybe one day, when she's older and standing in this same kitchen with a daughter of her own, she'll turn to the window and say, "This house made us better." That's all I ever wanted. Not control, not revenge, just a voice. And someone who listened. And now, at the end of it all, I had both. The house was no longer something to be lost or won. It was simply home. And this time, the last word was mine. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that silence can be strength, and that sometimes the greatest inheritance is finally being heard.